Councilmember Gregory. Councilmember Waring. Councilmember Seekings. Councilmember Shade. Councilmember Griffin. Councilmember Moody. Councilwoman Jackson. Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. And now if you would like to join us, Councilwoman Jackson will lead us in a prayer and a pledge of allegiance.
Yes, we call on you, Heavenly Father, as we meet you in ways that we have a hard time even imagining. So we trust that you are here with us tonight. We trust that you are giving us an understanding of your will for our city. Thank you for all of the citizens who are dedicated to making this their home and their community in which we may be proud to dwell. We ask your blessing and your protection over all those who are outside in this weather, working hard to make our city run. And we ask that you take us home safely. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, just a general announcement, and many of y'all have been here before, but just in case, in the most unlikely event that we needed to evacuate the premises, these are our two main exit doors, and there's also an exit door from the room to my right. If that were to occur, please don't use the elevator, but simply use the two stairs going down and then the one stair out to the front. Thank you. So just a reminder to everyone, probably not needed, but I'm so pleased and proud of our Spoleto Festival USA that's currently underway, along with our city's own Piccolo's Spoleto Festival. And these guidebooks are available, I think, out in the hallway and downstairs. There are tickets available for many of the hundreds of events. They're really remarkable, going on all over the city, including our new Cannon Street Cultural Arts Center. So please check out the remaining, I think still 14 days or so, maybe 13, of Piccolo and Spoleto USA. Next, I would like to have a proclamation remembering a colleague of ours, former council member Rodney Williams, who passed away recently. Many of you were at his funeral, many of the council members. Do we have that handy? That's the other one. Oh, I've got it here. So if I may just read a portion of this proclamation. Whereas Rodney Williams, a native Charlestonian, graduated from the College of Charleston with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. He later attended the College of Charleston Real Estate Academy and the Harvard Kennedy School for Executive Education, received certifications from the University of South Carolina Darla Moore School of Business. He was an active voice in the Charleston community and a tireless advocate for initiatives and causes to improve the quality of life for our citizens, shown through his work as Director of Housing Services for Sea Island Habitat for Humanity, a board member for and Smoke-Free Low Country Collaborative. Rodney's efforts in health and wellness in our community were noted. And whereas a former city council member, an active member of the Charleston community, Rodney Williams truly cared about this city and the people in it. He was a compassionate man, a loyal friend, and a truly remarkable man. And he will be deeply missed by myself and by the city of Charleston. I had a proclamation for his family and presented this to them at his funeral as an expression of the sincere regret that we hold for his loss, and we know that they will find comfort in the memories of Rodney's many accomplishments. Thank you. So next I'd like to invite some folks up to the stage with me, the platform. This is a proclamation on gun violence awareness. So with Jean Sutton and Kristen Moldenhauer and Moms Demand Action, as well as those here with We Are Their Voices, join me as I read a gun violence awareness proclamation. Please come forward. For those of you who may not know, We Are Their Voices is led by a group of parents. Please just come forward. Led by a group of parents who have lost children to incidences of gun violence, many right here in the Charleston area, and they've joined together to raise awareness and advocate for responsible gun ownership. And that's why we're all wearing these little orange ribbons today in support of this cause. Thank you all for being here this evening. I really appreciate it. Whereas every day, 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, and on average there are nearly 13,000 gun homicides every year, 13,000. Whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. And whereas mayors and law enforcement officers know their communities best, are the most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are best positioned to understand how to keep citizens safe. Whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade, was tragically shot and killed just weeks later. And to help honor her and the 100 Americans whose lives are cut short, and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June the 7th, 2019, the first Friday in June, as National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange. They chose this color not just because they might be Clemson Tiger fans, but because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas to help raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of victims and survivors, the community is encouraged to wear orange on June 7th. Whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership and to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim Friday, June 7th as National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the City of Charleston. And I would ask if one of the representatives would like, Jean or someone would like to come forward and make a few remarks. But it's not necessary.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say thank you for acknowledging National Gun Violence Awareness Day and our organizations united together, because we need to be the voices of those who've lost their lives to gun violence, and make sure that no other families and communities have to go through this. We thank you very much for this, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Oh, there we go. Thank you all for being with us and for what you do. Hey, young lady. Thank you. Good to see you. Oh, but they left already. Did y'all want to do some candles? We missed that. there were some commemorative candles maybe that were part of our recognition of Gun Awareness Day. We'll save that for June the 7th. Okay. Well, thank you for being with us again. God bless. So, all right, next we go to our public hearings. We have a few of those, 7 of them today. Mr. Morgan with our planning department will announce each one of these as they come forward, and then we will hear from the public on each of these matters, and I would ask that you please address the subject at hand and limit your remarks to 2 minutes when you come forward to address us. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The first item, E1, before you is a recent annexation. Here we go. At 2037 Lakeshore Drive on James Island. It's a single-family residence. It would come in the city with the SR1 classification. And staff and planning commission recommend approval.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, it comes to council. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay, number E2 is on Clements Ferry Road. It's undeveloped property south of I-526 and west of the Daniel Island development over towards the Cooper River side of the Kanehoy Peninsula. It is a tract of approximately 6 acres. It would be zoned RR1 in the city of Charleston. There's a companion tract just to the south across another parcel. Both are contiguous in the city. You can see that other companion tract. It's the 6-acre parcel is the larger parcel shown in yellow. The 1-acre tract is the smaller one shown in yellow on Clements Ferry Road, the southern end. And here is the other image here. That's also zoning E3. And both of these properties are recommended for RR1 rural residential, and both staff and planning commission recommend approval of that zoning designation.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, it comes to council.
That's 2 and 3?
Sir?
That's 2 and 3?
It's
Item 2 and 3.
It's item 2.
Just item 2.
Both are the same.
We have a motion to approve.
Okay, it's getting second reading there.
Okay.
So we have Griffin.
All in favor of second reading, please say aye.
Second.
Any opposed? Now for third reading and ratification. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan, number 3.
Okay. And again, this is just to the south. It's the 1-acre parcel south of the 6-acre parcel on Clements Ferry Road, recommended for R1, both by Planning Commission and City Council, by staff and Planning Commission.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter?
Move for approval. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now for third reading and ratification.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan.
Okay. This is E4, another annexation, single-family residence in West Ashley at 2234 Portside Way. Both staff and Planning Commission recommend SR1 zoning for the property.
All right. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter?
Move for approval.
Got a motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay. And then E5 is an ordinance amendment to a PUD that you all had seen in the last couple of years. This is the Fenwick PUD along Maybank Highway on the north side of Maybank Highway, on the north side of Maybank Highway on the east side of River Road. And it's, in the whole scheme of things, it's a relatively minor amendment. We've got some images that will kind of explain it. This relates to the commercial potential in the property. Here you see the property again on the north side of Maybank Highway. My pointer won't go to that, but it is a PUD that includes both residential development as well as commercial development. Here you see it outlined in a little bit more detail. Of course, this PUD is, of course, providing the right-of-way for the northern Pitchfork Road, which should be getting underway later this year. And the amendment relates to hours of operation of some of the commercial uses in the commercial component, allowing food stores, eating places, drug stores, things like that, to be open as early as 5 a.m. to midnight. The PUD had said originally 7 a.m. to midnight, so a relatively minor change there. And then a change in building frontage where none had been, where a 65% ratio had been required. Now none would be required, and this relates to the fact that the PUD would also be changed to having instead of having a 30,000 square foot maximum in the commercial area, you could go up to a 55,000 square foot maximum, but it would be restricted to one particular location. There would also be a driveway allowed should it be permitted by the SCDOT and have all their standards met. This image here shows the commercial area in orange, and the square at the middle, right here, would be the location that the 55,000 square foot commercial use could be established. Should the PUD amendment be approved, and should a 55,000 square foot storefront be utilized there, then all other commercial buildings would be limited to 15,000 square feet instead of the 30,000 square foot limit that is in the PUD at present. Both staff and Planning Commission have reviewed this and have been comfortable with these changes, and they are still in keeping with the spirit of the Johns Island Plan, because this is one of the community centers in the Johns Island Plan. It would still be a walkable location. It just might have a bigger store footprint within that location.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Please come forward. Hearing none, it comes to council. Second. Motion to approve. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Morgan, I was just curious if any of your maps there have a good delineation of the pitchfork route?
They do. This is a map that shows the pitchfork route. Do you mean in reference to this particular PUD or the whole system?
Well, this one in particular, but
Okay.
if you have an expanded view,
This
that'd be
blue
good.
line here would be the northern pitchfork, right?
Yes, sir.
Right there.
So that basically frames the PUD?
Yes, well, it goes through the middle of it, essentially. On the northern side of that road, there's a residential area, and then there is a commercial area along Maybank.
So it frames the commercial area,
I'll
essentially?
go back to, this is where the commercial area
Right,
is.
okay.
This is it as well.
Okay, that's,
Right.
and then how much of that, how much is residential? How many acres is that on the other side of the pitchfork?
I would have to go back and look at that. That is not changing in this amendment. Let's see if I can find
Just to
this.
put it in proportion.
I actually don't think I've got the total number of acres in here because that was not one of the pages that was being changed. That's just the residential component there. Oh, you were asking about the residential component? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about the whole PUD. Okay, 26.2. Yeah, yeah.
26 acres is residential. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Second.
I think we had a motion on the floor. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan.
Okay. Next item is number 6, which is an amendment to a PUD in West Ashley. This is the Verdier Point PUD. It was on your agenda a month or so ago and was deferred. But this is an amendment that would allow this PUD that was approved a number of years ago to be kind of recalibrated with today's market demand and with the information that the developers know in reference to wetlands and highland on the site. It would involve, this is the property on Bees Ferry. It's adjacent to the Grand Oaks development. Already a residential, multifamily residential apartment community has been built on the site, utilizing some of the units that are within the PUD, as well as a new roadway that comes into Bees Ferry Road. Lines up with Sanders all on Beach Ferry Road here. And here is an image that shows the overall land uses in the PUD. Again, the multifamily is the orangish color. The residential that would be subject to the PUD is in the area cross-hatched, and then the mixed-use area is in red along Bees Ferry with a parallel connecting road that would provide access to that commercial area as well without individual driveways on Bees Ferry. And it would allow attached single-family dwellings as a permitted use, which in the previous PUD had not allowed that, other than the multifamily. It would reduce frontage and rear setbacks. It would increase maximum lot coverage to 40% and increase maximum number of dwelling units without increasing the maximum density, because there have been some changes in the wetland and highland on the site. It's really only going up by 6 total units anyway, and it's the exact same maximum density as before. And there we go. And both staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of these changes.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve. Any comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Moody.
I know we got one more item here, but I was thinking about this, saying these public hearings and all this zoning and stuff. The real estate committee, I think you were in there, Chris, we talked about annexing this property in and all this stuff. And as I'm looking at all this, we look at these PUDs and we look at all their drainage, but we annex some of these lots into the city, and we don't have all the easements and everything we need on some of that property. Is that something that we could, what do we need to do to make that part of the process? Is that something we need to bring and put it in an ordinance or something that needs to be considered, or could you?
We are addressing that on a couple of fronts. We're kind of revamping our annexation process to look at drainage and flood zone and elevation issues as part of the annexation process. And then when those properties are developed, of course, they go through our technical review process. And at that time, just like with any new development, if there's an easement needed, we would get them to provide it. The overall design of the stormwater would be put together, so detention ponds, things like that would be calculated and examined. So we look at it on both those fronts. And
And I guess what really brought it home to me, we were talking about several neighborhoods west of Dash that have been developed,
Okay.
already in the city, and we don't have easements. We've got ditches, but we don't have easements to go in and clean them out. And so if we annex some of this property, we ought to require that these people provide, if they don't already
Yes.
have an easement on that property, they ought to provide an easement, at least on that lot. So as we move down the road, at some point, we can address some of these drainage issues, and not have to go back, condemn property, pay for it, or whatever.
Right. And as part of this kind of revamp of the annexation process, we'll be able to do that because stormwater will be providing input to each of those lots that gets annexed as we bring them in.
Yeah, we had requested that be done. I forget at what meeting the conversation came up, but I asked staff to kind of revamp that. Yes, sir. Councilmember Griffin.
Christopher, just to clear that up, so whenever a lot of times when people annex in, they're asking for an increase in density as well. Are we going to be able to see what they've done in drainage at that point up front? Because one thing that I always cringe at is it gives somebody more density to annex them in. We haven't seen any of their drainage or how they plan to drain their property. Are we going to get that information sooner now? Is that part of
That will be part of the staff examination of each each annexation, excuse me. Is it in a location based on its elevation that the density that's being requested, number one, we always check it to make sure it conforms to the comprehensive plan, but two, that it conforms to our drainage plans and our known or our knowledge of that particular area and its drainage issues.
Mr. Morgan.
Okay. And the final item, E7, has been deferred. It was discovered that the Opportunity Zone ordinance amendments had an error in what went to Planning Commission versus what went to Council for a first read. And so we're going to kick it back to Planning Commission to correct that error. So it would be deferred from tonight's agenda.
But since it was advertised, would anybody like to address the Opportunity Zones? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
only reason why I came tonight. Good summer reading, Democracy in America by de Tocqueville. I'm reading that this summer. The opportunity zones and similar to enterprise and empowerment zones, as I said, in terms of the causation of the problem, which would be the 1970, 86, and 94 crime bills. And those crime bills played a major role in high school dropout rates, dysfunctionality of families. What we see as the effects of the day started under Richard Nixon, giving it to the Democratic Party in 1970. So Senator Scott was born in 65, so he was like 5 years in on this. So I want to clearly understand, want you to understand it. What happened though, I want to add this to the record, just going to the Planning Commission in terms of my concerns. I did make a public comment across the street regarding these things to notice of intent of reappointment incumbent United States Magistrate Judge Kamani West. And this is on the record from Mr. Tecklenburg tonight, that be added to that, the planning piece, because you look at the dropout rates for all those years, from almost 50 years of dropout rates being that high, and the significance of what we see in our community. Now, I got this back in Article 3 of the Constitution, which in all these census tracts from West Virginia down, you have many people that cannot even afford legal counsel in these census tracts. They don't have the net worth or the capacity to protect their civil rights, their life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness. That's right there for you too. So, as a former member of the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning and Enabling Act, I feel the need under public safety and public health and morals to deal with this issue. That's why I use my credentials for that reason added to this. And my SCDOT background as well, as far as minority vendors and trying to get those opportunities in these zones for minority businesses who can't get bonding, who can't get insurance bonding, to provide opportunities for these projects. And also, in closing, the flood commission. Now, many of the census tracts do not have any wind, hail, or any type of flood insurance. So the critical question with the $9.6 billion being held up in Congress right now, Senator Scott needs to get that through and shepherd that through to get to the president, because June the 1st will begin hurricane season. And the Flood Water Commission, which he serves on, has like $1 billion available. I was at the meeting with Ms. Jackson. It's almost $1 billion in monies available for these census tracts that are in critical need of help. So we hope that you will have a meeting, the mayoral candidates have a meeting in terms of flooding and floodplains.
Thank you, sir. Did anyone else want to be heard on the opportunity zones? Yes, sir. Councilmember White.
I'm not sure if is this thing working? The light's not on. Can y'all hear me? I think it's okay. I think it's on. It's just the light's broken. I reckon. So I was thrown off by this because obviously it said it was up for second reading, and I knew we hadn't seen this before, and so I was really kind of confused by all that. But one of the things that I want to point out, and this is maybe staff can share this with the planning department, at least this council member's opinion of this situation. The way this ordinance reads for the opportunity zones, the first section, the first paragraph, it basically says that any property within an opportunity zone will immediately benefit from all of the, or receive all the benefits of an MU1 or MU2 designation without having to go through rezoning. Well, if our intention is to have every property in the opportunity zone become an apartment complex, that's a terrible idea. I mean, I'm not sure where this came from and why we even are contemplating this, but if you think back, every property that's been changed zoning to MU1 or MU2 that I can recall, every single one has been an apartment complex. And to say that we blanketly want to take every property in the opportunity zone and give it by right, basically, the designation of becoming an apartment complex, I mean, that if you want to talk about lack of vision, I mean, that there is the most, I don't even know what to say about that. But so I stopped reading it after the first sentence, but I think planning department or planning commission, excuse me, needs to know, and from at least this member, city council member, that I'm not sure where this came from and why we're even contemplating doing this, but that's the, I think that is the most irresponsible lack of vision process from a planning perspective of our city that I've ever seen. And so I'll get off the soapbox, but that's in a no-fly zone for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I know this matter did come to the Community Development Committee, and then from the committee it went to Planning Commission?
And had a first reading before council.
Had a first reading here before
Had a first
council.
reading before council,
So we
and
have
then-
seen this before
yes.
at council.
And then there was some discrepancy in the language about the
Right.
incentives that Planning Commission reviewed
Right.
that we need to correct, and it's
Right.
going to go back to Planning Commission, then back to
Right.
council.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sure we can discuss this when it comes back to us for second reading from Planning
Smith?
Commission.
Thank you.
Member Ware.
Can we get Planning Commission to come up? I'm not Planning Commission, but Mr. Lindsay from Planning, or Mr. Christopher, to address Councilman White's question.
So this was initially proposed by our then head of Business and Neighborhood Services, and these initiatives were specifically proposed to help get more affordable housing in areas that are in the opportunity zones, and that's why you see certain incentives. As the mayor did mention, this was incorrectly given to Planning Commission, so there's going to be another hearing before Planning Commission, and then it'll come back to you, so there's plenty of time to have additional discussion. But it was designed to, and those incentives are there in order to get more affordable housing in the areas where you have opportunity zones.
The only thing I'll say to that is, we pass laws, but we need to understand what does this actually create, and this requires vision. So I want you guys to think through this process with me. If we were to change the zoning as it's dictated here, every single developer who has opted to do MU1 or MU2 has also opted to pay a fee in lieu, which means that there will not be affordable housing. They pay a fee so that they don't have to build the affordable housing. This will not work. You will end up with apartment complexes in every parcel of the opportunity zone. And they get tax incentives for doing it. And so it's already financially feasible. It's going to become even more financially feasible to do it when you get tax incentives. It's not going to create affordable housing. They're going to pay the fee in lieu. We've raised almost $5 million in fee in lieu already because, as I recall, I think, Mr. Mayor, you stated this, everybody has opted to pay the fee in lieu, if I remember correctly.
Which has been a great benefit to our affordable housing program.
But if the intent is to put affordable housing in the geography of the opportunity zone, this 100% will not do that. 100%. This will just put apartment complexes in every opportunity zone parcel, bar none. Again, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but this is a grand example of we've got to think through and be more mindful and create more vision for what we're doing with our city. We're getting ready to hear about hotel ordinances, and yet we're creating a vacuum in an area where we're not really thinking through what we're going to end up with. And that's what we ultimately end up with, and then we're going to come back and say, oh man, we shouldn't have done that.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think that this could probably deserve its own work session with the Planning Commission. I think we need to get back to the reasons that we're having to scramble around and design something that we're calling zoning for opportunity zones, because the federal government has basically created tax incentivized development through this opportunity zone program. And the whole purpose of that is to supposedly engender affordability both in housing and in community development business opportunities for neighborhoods that have been suffering from the disparities that our nation is all too familiar with. So I've never liked the opportunity zone concept as it came down from the federal government, because everyone said as a predictor, if you read anything about it ahead of time, that it was going to be one of those programs that would have the unintended consequences that would create gentrification and high-end housing in places that we really don't want it here in Charleston. My understanding of this ordinance right now, though, and maybe I'm wrong, because I've only read it myself and haven't really discussed it with anybody else, but I didn't think that we were actually adding the entire MU part of the ordinance to what we have here as the amendments for the Opportunity Zone neighborhoods, the actual territories that we have to call Opportunity Zones, that the federal government told us we had to call Opportunity Zones. So I don't read in here that they have the option of having a fee in lieu, but if they do, I would agree with Councilmember White. We won't see a lick of affordability, especially since one of the additions to this ordinance that I labeled as good as I was reading it was that it was starting with a 60% of AMI cap. And so if we're adding a fee in lieu in addition to this, then I would totally agree with Councilmember White. I'm glad we have the opportunity to defer it. I think we do need to have an interest group that would discuss it and come back with something. But we cannot contain the Opportunity Zone as a program, Councilmember White. It's designed to build housing and hopefully find the kind of entrepreneurs who are going to take advantage of this from a tax incentive for themselves to go along with the spirit of the law and not the inaccuracies of how this is coming down to us.
So may I make a motion to defer?
It's already deferred by staff because it's got to go back to the planning commission before it comes back to us. So,
Mr. Mayor, can I make one more comment about that?
Sure.
As far as the location of the opportunity zones? I think that the most interesting thing about the concept in Charleston, the city of Charleston, the opportunity zones, we have very, very few areas that are actually part of the opportunity zone. But if you go look at the map and where the opportunity zones have been designated in the city of Charleston, Hall's Chop House is right in the center of it. I'll leave it there.
well, I would respectfully say if you looked at the map, they're close to the southern end of it, Councilmember White. And it is a federal program that basically gives, a capital gains tax benefit to real estate investment and business investment as well. And so you could build any kind of facility improvement and enjoy the federal tax benefit. So the whole intent of this thing was just to try to address our affordable housing need in the city and to provide to facilitate that if someone wanted to invest in Charleston's opportunity zone, that they think about affordable housing rather than some other option. Because you can build a storage center and get the tax break, if you will. And, we intentionally brought this forward to have a discussion, and we took it to Community Development Committee, I think, twice, and had a pretty robust conversation about it there, about helping facilitate affordable housing development in our city, that this might be just ways to do it. But I'm open to any improvements you want to suggest to it, and we've got time since it's going back to the Planning Commission before it comes back here. Look forward to that. Councilmember Ware.
Mr. Mayor, if this is going back to the Planning Commission, shouldn't we send something with it? As opposed to, the Planning Commission needs a little help in some of the discussion that's been around the table. I remember Councilmember Lewis saying in Community Development that this is the last frontier. Councilmember White is right in that the developments that have already occurred have been high-end apartments that didn't include one affordable unit. And this was an attempt to try to slip something in on that through our capacity. I know the Opportunity Zone is a federal program, but zoning is within the auspices of this council and mayor and city.
Right.
Should we send this back to Community Development?
And I'm actually on community development, and I recall us having discussions, and I have to admit, I don't even recall, and the reason why I asked, I stepped away in a minute, I don't even recall that we actually, I guess maybe it was a late night or something, and we passed this. I didn't even recall that we had had the opportunity to have this first run, but I don't recall in community development that we actually had the full ordinance, and maybe I'm wrong about that. I just don't recall that we actually, I think we had a broad discussion, but did y'all, I mean, did we have this ordinance in front of us? I don't recall that.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Referred it to
Right.
the planning.
Right,
Just
okay.
at the opportunity zone.
Right.
Because when we explained about the opportunity zone, this is not the way we were looking for the zone to come back down from the federal government, but they dictated how they was going to do the opportunity zone, because we thought the opportunity zone was going to act the same way as the enterprise zone and getting into the blighted area. But that's not the way it came back, and then we didn't have no say-so on it. Right. So that's what happened.
Well, why don't I make a motion to defer, but have it go to
Yeah, I'd second that.
Well, it's already deferred, but if you want to make a motion to send it back
I was looking
to...
at my agenda, and on the agenda, it doesn't show it being deferred.
I think we announced that. It was deferred by staff because of that reason, but if you want to make a motion to send it back to community develop for a third discussion, that would be great.
That'd be my motion.
Do I have a second?
Before plan.
Yeah.
That'll help out plan.
We have a motion and a second, send it back to community development. Councilmember Griffin.
I think that's the best course of action too, because I don't want something going to planning that's worded different than what we voted on. So I would rather take this from the beginning. If we're going to change the language, and we've kind of gone about it in a weird way, we might as well start over on this and have it go back to community development and then come back to us for a first reading, make sure that we have the language right. Because for us to go back to planning and it's worded differently than what we voted on the first time, that to me is going to be very confusing when it comes back.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Our minutes from May 14th are deferred, so we're going to move on to our citizens' participation period. It's normally a 30-minute period. We have about 20 folks signed up. I think a few of them have already spoken. So I'm going to ask everyone to, when you give your name and address, to limit your remarks to a minute and a half so we can move along. Madam Clerk will call about 4 or 5 names, and if y'all would come forward and queue up, we look forward to hearing from you.
Anthony Bryant, Muhammad Idris, Gus Maloney, Mark Knapp, and Jimmy Kerr. In that order, please.
Well, based upon Scott S. Harris, Clerk of the Supreme Court, my name is Anthony G. Bryant, and you got the address on the letter. I don't drive for Uber or Lyft. I'm not an Uber driver or Lyft driver. I don't drive there. And so I was on my mother's porch reading a book, and someone called the City of Charleston Police Department regarding something, a third-party observation. When a third party calls the police and the police comes, that's an official observation. In South Carolina, it's a stand your ground law. The stand your ground law undermines, in my opinion, your hate crime bill. Your hate crime ordinance is undermined by the stand your ground law, because Trayvon Martin, an individual, saw that Trayvon Martin and used force on him as an individual. U.S. versus Cruikshank was when African Americans wanted to vote in 1873. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment was justified by the Supreme Court for African Americans to vote. So the Second Amendment has always been used to justify force on black men. Okay, and also under Article 1, under Article 3, which many African Americans cannot afford legal counsel or an appropriate defense on a local, county, or state or federal level, then they have no recourse. They just have civil rights in name only. So therefore, that's my experience I had on the 25th after I closed on my comment with the federal court across the street regarding these issues of the Second Amendment in terms of how it's been used and applied to black folk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The action of Mayor John Teckenberg dealing with Ms. Wineglass money was the action of a thief. And Mayor Teckenberg should be charged with misappropriation of fund and charged with stealing, not tomorrow, but today. He has already pled guilty, so what is the delay? We have in this city locked up a person who said that he was not guilty of a charge. and the evidence presented showed that he was not guilty, but yet he was placed on $2,500 bond after being handcuffed in the middle of the night and placed in the county jail for nothing until someone put up the bond money. How do I know about this? I know about this because I am the person who was falsely accused. Where is the justice? And as far as the staff, remember, Prophet Moses, peace and blessing of God be upon him, his staff turned into a snake. So I'm glad y'all checking the staff of Mayor Tecklenburg. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Gus Maloney.
Yes, my name is Gus Maloney. I reside at 3058 Ashley River Road. And I thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. On October 30th, a young girl by the name of Casey J. had too much to drink and she got behind the wheel of the car. She plowed into and practically over a pedicab. She fled the scene of the accident. She was chased down and stopped about a half mile away from where that accident occurred. The police came, she took a field sobriety test, she failed it. She took a breathalyzer test, she blew a .24, which is 3 times legal limit. On top of that, there was a dash cam video that caught the whole incident from beginning to end, and that's on YouTube for all to see. I had absolute confidence that justice would be done in that case. On May 16th, she entered a guilty plea for DUI first and was given a $187 fine and 24 hours of community service. Guys, we took a wrong path somewhere. I would like to know why she wasn't charged with additional crimes, such as fleeing the scene of an accident, failure to render aid, reckless driving, speeding. She was only charged with DUI. That was the only charge she faced. I would like to know why the prosecutor in that case, after telling me that he would accept nothing less than the full penalty of the law, accepted a guilty plea from her for a lower alcohol content, which effectively lowered the minimum fine from $1,000 to $500 and lowered the jail time from 30 days to just 72 hours.
Time.
Thank you, sir.
And that's half my point.
Right.
But you get it, right?
We get it. Thank you. We want to know too, sir.
Mark.
Point taken. Sound familiar? Deja vu. Here we go again. Next. I don't know how many times I have to tell you folks about these traffic lights. Almost every morning now, I leave and come up 17, and I almost stop every day at DuPont Road at 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. You need to fire some people. I'm telling you, somebody's lining their pockets and they're not doing their job. As for the police department, I haven't been able to find the chief. He hasn't called me back. But actually, one of my men was arrested improperly, and he's an African American. He was sleeping in a truck. I don't know why, 3 o'clock in the morning. But he had a CWP, concealed weapons permit. They arrested him for having an illegal firearm. He was arrested, booked in the county jail at 6:15, kicked out at 6:17, but it took him 4 hours to get out of the jail. Now, I don't know what's going on in this police department, but it needs to get some new leadership it's starting to look like. Plus, the previous problem we had with the drunk driving, I got one story from one officer high up in the ranks, and I got a completely 180-degree story from someone else. I don't know what's going on, but we need to look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jimmy Kerr.
Good evening. I'm Jimmy Kerr. My address is 2745 Cantor Lane on Johns Island. I want to thank you all for considering number K1 tonight for the third reading and for the last 2 times that we've been here before you. There's been a lot of discussion about this issue, this PUD, but I want to focus on a couple of salient points that I commend to you for consideration. The critical facts are that the PUD, we've heard before from council, is perhaps the best way of developing property because you know really what you're getting. In fact, in this particular PUD, with some of the historical issues on that are being preserved in the parks and so forth, are noteworthy. We have reduced further the density beyond what we originally submitted. The meets all of the Johns Island plans and city's regulations for Johns Island, asking for no exemptions or exceptions. Since our last meeting, it's important to note that the two things that were asked to happen have happened, namely that the Southern Tyne is incorporated with language into the PUD, and secondly, that the zoning by 100 units has been reduced, included in the PUD. I will note that the Kerr commercial tract, we have voluntarily imposed a 2-year moratorium on ourselves, and it's included in there. We will not ask for any permits on that commercial tract for a period of 2 years at least. There's no plans on this property currently, but I do that so it gives some time to try to solve the problems. Thank you. Look at what we do, not what we say. The Kerrs have always been involved in the community, and I ask you to do that, not just what I'm telling you we could do. Look at what we have done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next we'll have Diane DeAngelis, Russ Seaman, Monica Jefferson, Vicki Schmidt, and Winslow Hasty. Board, please.
Hi, I'm Diane DeAngelis, and I live in the French Quarter at 32 Prelo Street. And I want to thank the Historic Charleston Foundation and the Preservation Society for keeping me up to date on the hotel task force. And I want to remind everybody here that we in the French Quarter, especially those along the water and also in Ansonboro, live next to the biggest hotel that comes into Charleston all the time and brings now over 3,000 people and turns them over. The cruise line is like a big hotel, and so we in the French Quarter are under siege, and we want the task force to be reminded of that we have a special problem. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Russ Seaman, 501 Wando Park Boulevard. I'm here to speak on the Kerr tract. Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Kerr's comments. Just like to reiterate a few points. First off, what we're asking to build can be built already, but we're decreasing the number of units significantly and deferring even more of the units. We're donating land for a future traffic solution and providing a route. That language has been incorporated into the PUD. The PUD provides way more open space than the by right zoning would. And by reducing density and eliminating the GO zoning, we're reducing traffic. Please vote for less density, future traffic solutions, traffic reduction, and more open space for Johns Island by supporting this PUD. We're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Monica Jefferson. Okay. Vicki Schmidt, Winslow Hasty.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Winslow Hasty with the Historic Charleston Foundation. I'm here to speak about the accommodations overlay ordinance that's before you this evening for first reading. I was pleased and honored to be a part of the hotel task force, and I want to thank everybody who participated in that effort. I think it was a really great model for moving forward on some of these complex, thorny issues that sometimes get kind of stuck in the spin cycle of the legislative process. I was very pleased to see the degree of consensus that the entire group felt. We had members of the hospitality industry, we had neighborhood representation, preservation organizations, and several members of this council and the mayor. And once we really all sat down and got into this process, we realized how much consensus there really was. So we strongly recommend that you give this ordinance first reading. Our hope is that this task force will continue. I think there's more work to be done, and people conceded on all sides, but I think all in all, everybody at the end of the process felt very positive about where we're heading. Even Lenny Krawcheck, who participated sort of on the sidelines, was extremely important to have his perspective, and I think the ammunition and the regulatory authority that we're giving him gives him a lot more opportunity to regulate hotels the way he would like to, that he thinks is best for the health of our city. So again, this represents diversity of perspectives, and we commend it to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll move on. John Marshland, Christopher King, Mark Lipmeyer, maybe, Miles Ewing, and Rainey Evans. That order, please.
John.
Good evening. John Marsland. I'm the current president of the Ansonboro Neighborhood Association and had the privilege of serving as an alternate on the Ordinance Amendment Task Force. Again, I'd like to thank the mayor for allowing me that opportunity. I'm here to advocate that you approve the first reading. I agree with Mr. Hasty's summary. The point I wanted to convey, which isn't necessarily in the context of the amendment that you're reading, but Chairman Krawcheck, I thought, made a very important point at the beginning of the task force meeting, and that was that the current ordinance as written in the current state of hotel development in the city leaves the BZAZ as really nothing more than a traffic bump. There's virtually nothing that they can do with the current ordinance to stop a development. What we believe the current draft amendment does is, if approved from first reading, would immediately enable the BZAZ to question and challenge development until further questions can be answered. I think also, I think the way the process works, obviously there are some other details that are worth exploring. I think we also talked about the idea that the question of what is a goal for mixed use, what is an appropriate level of density, are questions that are appropriate and probably best suited to be addressed in the upcoming comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Good evening, Christopher King with the Preservation Society of Charleston. I heard a rumor today that Charleston was the #1 Memorial Day destination in America. I don't know if it's true, but if you were downtown, it certainly felt like it. I read in the paper today that they're adding more flights to bring in more people for the tourism season. The more people want to visit Charleston, the more hotel proposals we're going to see. And right now, the ordinance does not provide the tools to ensure that these hotels consider the long-term health and balance of our city. And I think Mr. Hasty said it well. This was a collaborative effort. And how often do you get to hear that the CVB, the hotel industry, neighborhoods, and preservation groups are in agreement? And that's what you have before you tonight, is the culmination of that work. And we have been standing up and urging for this for years. You have an ordinance in front of you. Is it perfect? No. Is it very good? Absolutely. Let's get it first reading. Let's get it to the Planning Commission. Let's continue to work on this, test it, and make sure this works. Let's make sure it's bulletproof, and let's go and protect residential properties. Let's protect our office. Let's protect our retail, and let's get a tie into affordable housing. Let's go get this done and start doing a better job regulating hotels. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Lipsmeyer with Stanley Martin Homes. We are the applicant for the Kerr property. I'm here tonight to answer any questions if needed. Thank you.
All right. Miles Ewing.
Phyllis Ewing.
I'm sorry, Phyllis.
Phyllis Ewing. I live at 4 Ashley Avenue, and I'm here to support the first reading of the hotel amendment. It's been done. I think that we're really, every week or 2 weeks it goes by, there's another hotel thing that's given conceptual approval or approval at the BZA. My understanding is once this is in process, that they can stop some of this development and use this new ordinance that will go back to it. I think time is of the essence. I appreciate your listening to me, and I urge you to please get on with the first reading of this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rainey Evans.
I didn't have my glasses on, so I didn't know I was signing up for that.
Okay.
Let me say that Phyllis said it all.
I'll bring the microphone.
I said I didn't have my glasses and I didn't know that I was signing up to speak. But let me say that Phyllis said it all. And so did Chris, and so did Winslow. Wonderful. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right, next will be Peter Manny, Jeremy Rutledge, Franny Henty, Tawana Alston maybe, and the Reverend Charles Hayward.
Come on forward if you're having a call.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Tecklenburg and members of City Council. My name is Jeremy Rutledge, and I'm the senior pastor of the Circular Congregational Church on 150 Meeting Street. I come this evening to share my conscience and to appeal to your consciences as well. I'm deeply troubled by the John C. Calhoun statue that towers over our city and all its citizens. Calhoun believed that white people were superior to black people and that the enslavement of black people was a positive good. I find his beliefs morally reprehensible, and I reject them completely. I believe many of you also reject those beliefs, which we can only refer to as white supremacist beliefs. Yet Calhoun remains literally on a pedestal at the center of our civic life, lifted up in a place of prominence. I'm aware that thanks to the Heritage Act, it will take an act of our state legislature in order to change things. I stand here tonight with a simple request. I ask each of you to join me in registering your moral objection to the Calhoun statue. To reject Calhoun's message that white people are superior to black people is to reject the statue, which is a symbol of that message. Some will claim that the statue is about history and not hate, yet if white supremacy is not hateful, then I don't know what is. I believe the statue belongs in a museum where children may learn about it in context, but in our public spaces we deserve better. I appeal to your conscience and I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Franny?
Hi. Good evening, City Council. And normally when I come and speak, I don't like to, but I talk about things that I'd like for y'all to change, but I want to say thank you for the Wamba drainage study. So I'm not just here about what I want to change. And then with regard to zoning, do you look, I'm still learning more about how that happens. And do you look at topography, hydrology, and flood elevations before you make zoning regulations? I'm not sure who to ask that question to. And then how do roadways and traffic impact the subdivision approvals? You'd have to be blind or check your pulse if you don't see the traffic crisis that we're into. And I'd like to know more about that. And then how do contiguous neighbors' opinions weigh in on subdivision approval? In North Charleston, I know there's a district where one of the council ladies, before a subdivision is approved, everyone in the neighborhood or contiguous to a specific subdivision has to sign off on it, or how they feel about it. That's considered. So, thank you.
Okay, Tawana Alston. Tawana. Okay, the Reverend Charles
Hayward.
Oh, thank you. I'm Reverend Charles Hayward, 4037 Gift Boulevard on Johns Island. To Mayor Tecklenburg and Council, I want to appeal to you to make it right. That is, to take the necessary actions by the powers given you to have the John C. Calhoun monument removed from public display any place within our beloved city. Why? The monument continues to memorialize and perpetuate what Mr. Calhoun stood for. Each of you on this council are educated, intelligent, and have moral principles. You know the history. No one living today in this room ever met John C. Calhoun. But 169 years later, what he stood for is increasingly being experienced by the African Americans. We record it on our cell phones. We report it on the news. You as council have a moral, ethical, and political responsibility to make it right. I pray that each of you, especially those of you who are candidates to serve the next term as mayor of this city, will go on public record concerning your position and your intentions about this removal. The voices to act or not act will begin to get louder and louder. And history will record you individually and collectively as a council, whether you reaffirm a heritage that continued to demoralize or dehumanize African Americans, or whether you rejected this memorialized history, reaffirmed the humanity of all citizens, and whether you made it right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Sir. All right, that ends our public participation period. Did we leave anybody out? Did anybody sign up that didn't get a chance to speak? All right. So next we'll go to our appointments for the Planning Commission and the Health and Wellness Advisory Commission. Councilmember Lewis.
I've had one of my constituents 2 times put in an application for the Planning Commission. Erica Harris is why her name is my wife. I've asked and I've checked with your office. They said they couldn't find her application. She put in another one. She assured me that she was going to be on this agenda for tonight, and I am recommending Erica Harris to be a part of the Planning Commission. She has served on the VAR for the City of Charleston. She's very intelligent, hard-working, and I really would like to see her on the Planning Commission.
Second the motion.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
That's a motion? Okay, and we got a second to nominate Erica Harrison to the Planning Commission. And, okay. Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So we have, I guess she would be considered a new appointment. And we still had 2 other new appointments and 2 reappointments. So I stand, the floor is open for any other motions that would complete the 4 positions.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Shealy and I were hoping to make a comment regarding one of the matters that came up in the citizen participation. Just very quickly, we didn't have an opportunity to do that as we kind of moved on, but I just wanted to reiterate the point that Mr. Maloney had made about that DUI arrest, and I would ask that maybe we could look into that matter a little bit more, because as you know, we've had some very serious, tragic DUIs downtown, and this could have been another one. And we cannot take them lightly. So if Councilmember Sheila, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but if we could maybe get with Scarlett Wilson's office and the prosecutor on that case, find out why he made that decision, maybe talk to our judge, and just get a little bit more clarification. I think the public deserves to know the answer to that.
I duly noted that myself, but we'll be happy to look further into that. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I want to add, Mr. Maloney didn't get time to tell the whole story on this thing, but he was there. Channel 5 did a story on this, and also Channel 4 did a story on this particular instance, and the newspaper did a very good article on this as well. And there is video on there that's very, very clear in this situation that when Miss Casey J hit that pedicab, she took off. I mean, she slammed the gas and took off, went as fast as she could, and probably would have done further damage, maybe have killed somebody if it wasn't for Mr. Maloney, who pulled up beside her, got her to slow down, pulled in front of her, opened her door, and took the keys out. This could have been a horrible, horrible instance, because she is flying down the middle of downtown Charleston after she's already hit someone, and then she accepts the breathalyzer. She blows well past the legal limit. And every bit of this is documented on video, and the public has seen it. And she got 24 hours community service. And I spoke with Councilman Shahid a little while ago and asked, is there something, we just passed a law or ordinance on hate crimes here. Is there something we can do through our committees and through our council here to make sure that when there's a clear-cut DUI, the guy could have been killed. He was very, very fortunate. He came out with some minor injuries to his knee, but he could have been killed. She takes off. I mean, she leaves the scene. And it's all right there on video. There's no guessing here on this thing. And it just seems like we ought to be able to do, if we can do an ordinance like we did a couple of months ago, it seems like maybe this council can do something with more information of this case, of course, and see what can be done on here. So,
thank you, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So I've already asked that we schedule a public safety committee meeting to take up several issues. One of this will be, but Mr. Shealy's asked me about on an ordinance, and to look into what may have happened with this particular incident so we can get it looked into. So we'll try to have that meeting before the June 18th meeting.
Absolutely. Councilmember Lewis.
Mr. Mayor, I had a similar incident like that on King Street between England and Carolina, between England and Carolina. There is a young lady about 3 weeks ago hit this guy off the bicycle. She was charged with DUI. The guy was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. He died last week. I don't know whether the charges were operated, but she got a PR bond. You know, that means I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, I don't set the rules, but for somebody to get hit off a bicycle, a person charged with DUI, and less than 24 hours later, she's out the street on a 3-hour bond. You know, I don't know what's going on with the system. I know it's you're on your patrol because you're not the prosecutor, you don't have the coach, but, you know, we would like to know how these things are happening, especially when we have to deal and listen to people talking about it.
Yes, sir. Anyone further? Councilmember Seekings?
Thank you, Mr. Just briefly, this conversation just brings back a theme that we've talked about a good bit, and I think actually that everyone on this council and you, Mayor, agreed that we should have a judiciary committee. I mean, this is a place, we should be looking at what's going on in the processes of the city, and nowhere more important than what goes on in our judiciary and how that all happens. So I would again call for us to look at and form a judiciary committee, because we can take up a lot of issues, including this issue sort of. So, I mean, I think I've made that motion, but I would make a motion again. Let's get that put together. Let's get with our legal team and put together a judiciary committee. That's my motion.
All right.
We already voted on one.
We
Well, I have a
voted
motion
on Erica
Well,
Harris.
I'm ready to take that up really quickly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we were in the midst of a different matter when, respectfully, could we ask that our public safety committee take this matter up after we get a little more review from from the appropriate law enforcement and...
That's fine, but then I move that we also send for a hearing and consideration at Councilmember Shade's committee, the Public Safety Committee, the formation of a Judiciary Committee. I would like that to be on his next agenda, please, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll do that.
I have a motion on the Planning Commission. I move that we reappoint the 2 currently serving Planning Commission members, and that we defer consideration of the new appointments until the next meeting, because we've now filled one of those 2 slots. You can bring back a recommendation to us, Mr. Mayor, and then we can consider that. That's my motion.
Right. And by way of explanation, Councilmember Lewis, when we look at a replacement, there's certain spots on the Planning Commission, and one is an attorney's spot, and that position was not available right now. So I'm not saying that an attorney can't serve in a non-attorney slot. I think that's possible. I see Susan shaking her head, but I guess that's what kind of drove that decision. So we have a motion on the floor to reappoint Gordon Gear and Angie Johnson, and we have a second. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we vote on the reappointments, I would just like some clarification from, I'm sure, our corporate counsel. When we, or maybe your office, when we, I know that we solicit the consideration by the current commissioners who are up for renewal, asking them if they would like to be reappointed, so I have no doubt about that. But then do we ask them to update their credentials at the time that they do that? And if that's true, then I'm wondering at what point do we get to someone's work as a potential conflict of interest, or at least it would be I think a role that someone on the Planning Commission could be accused of having more bias in favor of the real estate industry, for example. So I don't know if there is, a hard and fast answer to when we would get to a commissioner having too close a role in his career to be with the real estate industry and, be able to be evaluated as maybe being a little bit too influenced by his real estate career. Not that he would do it on purpose, but just I'm just asking that because I don't know. I don't know how.
Well, I think one of the positions is also specified for someone in the real estate profession in order to bring that background and experience to the commission. So it's actually specified that way, but I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2. Do y'all know? Anyway.
And so then we would expect
that
those individuals to recuse themselves when they have some, close relationship with.
Well, that would apply, just as it does to us here on council. If someone had a financial interest in a matter coming before the Planning Commission, they would need to recuse themselves. Absolutely. Yeah. Councilmember Seekings and Griffin.
Well, just briefly, as specifically to Mr. Gear, I mean, if you go look at, first off, his participation rate is the highest of anybody on the Planning Commission. He shows up, he's been the chairman, he's a dutiful person out there. I mean, I don't agree with everything he or that Planning Commission does, but he is, as far as this person's seen, and I go to a lot of those meetings, I know Councilmember Jackson does too. I mean, he's an excellent member of that Planning Commission.
Well, in addition, Mr. Gear actually has a background in training in city planning.
Absolutely.
In addition to the real estate.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just asking in terms of, future decisions and what we should be doing about this, so I appreciate the education.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Griffin, then Moody.
I was added into an email chain from some residents in regards to, I believe, the same matter that Councilwoman Jackson is bringing up about a transaction that was made and Mr. Gear was a part of and subsequently could have voted on. And these constituents and residents asked for some information from our staff about voting records and that sort of thing. And they asked for weeks and never got them. No reply, no nothing from our city whatsoever. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't see why. No, I'm not. I asked, I'm talking about.
Council,
I'm asking about somebody doing a voting record, would be the minutes, which is public knowledge, isn't it?
Certainly the minutes are public information. Was a FOIA submitted, or
Yes.
did it go to the legal department?
Yes. I believe so. I'm happy to talk with you about this afterwards, too.
Sure.
But I would like to defer the reappointments because I'd like to get more information on that. I think that any time that a resident makes an accusation like that, it should at least be looked into. And me being on these email chains now and getting no response from our staff, I would like to get that response before we make any move forward on that. But if you don't want to honor that, Councilmember Seekins, that's fine, but my motion to defer takes precedence, so.
We have a motion to defer. Is there a second? Hearing none, I'll call on Councilmember Moody, who had his hand up before. And then I would like to call the question.
Yeah, I guess my question, there's two of them here, has to do with qualification. I know on the Planning Commission that there is a requirement that these people attend some training, couple days, 3 days, something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's pretty intensive. And I'm not sure, my first question would be, these that are being reappointed, have they attended those meetings? Have they attended that training?
My understanding is they are not up to date, and they've been asked to get their training hours up to date.
That they're not up to date now?
At this point, that's correct. We've
How often are they required to do the training? Is it so many days a year, or so many days when they first begin?
The training requirements vary depending on the profession of the person who is appointed. Those who are members of professional organizations such as landscape architects or lawyers can fulfill the requirements through their own professional association. Those who are members at large and are not members of professional associations have to attend the training that we offer. So it depends on who they are. In general, though, it's 3 sessions per year.
So these two that are up for reappointment, have they, I mean, I know both of them have been on here for a long time, so they have so much a year, or every 3 years they have to do some, or?
We were just discussing that, Councilmember. I actually don't know the exact answer. In the past, I know that those two members have attended.
Okay.
This current year, I can't speak to it. I just haven't seen it. But I do know that in the past, they have attended the training that was required of them. But I can look into that immediately for you.
That's fine. I just wanted to be sure that they had attended something.
Well, I know that in past years they have attended those, but the current year I'm just honestly not up to date on that, but I could find out for you.
Okay. The two that are up for appointment here, I had a conversation with Dr. Brown, great guy. I'm not sure exactly whether he was asked. I don't think he just came out of the blue and decided to join this body. Because I know he just got, he's on the Board of Trustees at the Medical University. Just got appointed there, and I think if he takes this, he'd have to give up that position at the Medical University as a trustee. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's not dual office.
I don't know. I'd have to find out the specifics of what position he's holding, and we can look into that and report.
But I guess my question is, and we're going to defer this, I mean, I would love to have Dr. Brown on this body, but I mean, I served with him. We were both on the Star Gospel Mission Board for a while. And when he got appointed at Medical University, he dropped off of that board because he didn't have the time. And I called him and asked him, I said, you know what you're getting into here? And he said, well, it's just 1 month a week, or one meeting a month. And I said, no. and so I suggested he call a couple people and find out exactly what's involved. So there's something going on with our recruiting process here, and Dr. Brown would be a great add to this thing, but I don't know that he knew exactly what he was getting into, and I don't think he'd want to give up his Medical University trusteeship to take this position. So, and then the other thing was the other gentleman here, my package didn't have any information on him. Did everybody else have information?
Mr. Yon, Matt Yon?
Yeah.
It should have last meeting when we put it on your desk.
No, I mean, I got my package.
Yeah.
We didn't do this. We'll have to check with the person who.
Yeah.
You have a cover sheet that has the contacts and the process and
That
stuff.
was given to us to put in your agenda pad.
Right.
All right, but everybody else has got a resume or a bio on what they've done.
Okay.
Follow up with Mike.
Okay.
This didn't have it.
All right.
So
So-
I didn't know anything about it, so I was going to vote to defer him anyway, so.
Well, the matter on the floor right now is just to reappoint Mr. Gear and Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, let me
Mr.
speak to
Waring.
that. I served with Mr. Gear at least for about 10 years, okay? And I found him to be a stand-up guy. But there has been an accusation made, and if I am him, and I think we ought to discuss this, I do think we ought to discuss it in executive session. And what Councilman Griffith is saying, I guess needs to be followed up on, because I don't know how many citizens are involved. But let me say this. I have actually seen where items of a conflict came up during the time that I served with him. And not only did he not vote on it, he actually left the room while the measure was being debated. So we didn't always agree on items. I think he'd say the same for me. But by the same token, he's a man of integrity. So but what Councilman Griffin has brought up, I think we need to look into it, and only for that reason, because that needs to be cleared up, and I think Mr. Gear would want it cleared up, and not rush through it. So, I mean, but I don't think we ought to discuss it on the floor, Council.
Councilmember Griffin, and then Jackson.
Is there something wrong with me?
No, sir.
I just want to clarify that I'm not accusing him by any way, but I was put on an email chain with an accusation and with a FOIA request, and I just want to make sure it's taken care of, because as a council member, I feel like it's our due diligence. If somebody includes us in something like that, we just need to make sure that it is taken care of.
And I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is that, well, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Jackson was next.
Thank you. I just want to say the same thing, that my question in bringing up this topic was literally a categorical, and not I wasn't talking about any one person, except that it had been brought to my attention and it made me want to ask the questions. So I apologize to our corporate counsel and planning director for not knowing the regulations to the level of detail about the type of qualifications that we're asking our planning commissioners to have. So anyway, I did not mean to bring up anything that was even borderline needing to go into executive session about any individuals.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But what I'm just saying, if somebody put in a FOIA request and all of that, I think it needs to be followed up on. If I were on that commission, I would want it to be followed up on. But I've said, I've served with Mr. Gear. He's a class guy. I've seen him in action. But that needs to be answered. And so this shouldn't be ramrodded through without getting an answer. That's all I'm saying.
No, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I hadn't been brought to my attention before, and I'm happy to look into it. Now,
Just very briefly. There's a motion to defer, so I would like to just speak to that just very briefly, because I think what Councilmember...
That motion never got seconded. The motion on the floor is to reappoint Mr. Gear and Ms. Johnson.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, the reason I didn't second it, because I wanted to make my point. I wanted to make my point what I just made.
Right.
And I think that would be ramrodding it through. So if you're going to carry this motion with, to appoint the two people, I'd certainly vote on Ms. Johnson right now. But I think, Mr. Gear, I think that situation needs to be answered. And I think it will be answered, probably in his favor. But I didn't second his motion to defer because I wanted to have a chance to discuss. And then, you didn't know this, but I mean, Councilman Seekings put that motion on the floor. It was seconded by Councilman Shaheed, and I didn't get a chance.
I'm just trying to follow the motion on the floor.
I know.
That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to pass judgment one way or the other.
Let me ask.
So we had a motion on the floor to reappoint Mr. Gear and Ms. Johnson.
Correct.
And we had a motion to defer that did not get seconded until some considerable time later. I presume your motion to defer still. Yeah. We have a motion to defer and a second, which takes precedence. All in favor of deferring?
I would like to speak to that motion before we vote on it. As I've been listening very closely, I do believe that Councilmember Griffin was really observing that there had not been some action taken on a request he'd made from the staff. It was not a direct complaint about Mr. Gear. It was a complaint about process.
I see.
Now, look, what's going on in the city right now when it comes to the planning commission? We've got the hotel ordinance probably going to go there. We've got a lot of things going on there. I mean, if there's some issue down the road that's getting taken up, I just don't think the two should be tied into each other. We can reappoint Mr. Gear. Councilmember Griffin's request that whatever it is this email is about and this floor request can be dealt with. So if the motion is defer, I'm going to vote against it, not because I don't think it should be looked into. I just think we should separate the two. Let's get these appointments done. There's nothing that Mr. Gear has done that we know of to disqualify him. In fact, everything we know about him is that he's qualified, and we're going to need a full planning commission going forward. So I'm going to vote no on the deferral for the reasons that I just stated, not because of not wanting his questions to be answered.
Councilmember Jackson and then Moody.
Please. I mean, my understanding, and I've been, shown my ignorance tonight about planning commission regulations, but I thought that I was correctly informed that if we have a reappointment and the expiration date is officially come and gone, that person serves until there's a new appointment. Right. So we will have a planning commission.
Councilmember Moody. Would anyone else like to be heard on the motion to defer? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay.
Okay, so it's two. Who's the?
Councilmember Shade. All right. The ayes have it. Okay.
Mayor.
Yes.
For the question for Councilmember Moody, I think Mike can answer your question. I think it was just something that was left off.
Okay. So we have information about Mr. Yawn to share with you. Okay. So next up is our Health and Wellness Advisory Committee appointments. Do I hear a motion? We have a motion to approve them and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next we get to our council committee reports. First is our Committee on Public Works and Utilities. Councilmember Waring.
I was late in getting to the meeting. Mr. Mayor, you conducted the meeting, so if you'd be kind enough to carry the minutes.
Well, we did have, thank you, Mr. Chairman, we did have a couple of acceptances and dedications of public right-of-way, and they were approved by the committee unanimously. And since we didn't, we do need to have council action on those matters under J1A. I would ask for a motion to approve those acceptances and dedications.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, we got a report from our stormwater department head, Matt Fountain, and as has become the custom, I'd like to ask him to give us a brief recap of his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Just in brief, we discussed that we had finished installing the check valves with the 50-50 cost split with CWS that was approved at the previous council meeting on both South Adgers and Exchange Street. The King Uji project, as we mentioned, has been notified for the Rural Infrastructure Agency, the RIA, that they have, we've received approximately $500,000 for that project, and we're currently negotiating preliminary design with the consultant. We did make some good progress in a couple of meetings last week with MUSC and Roper Hospital towards them offering an easement to dedicate for the Earhart Shaft project. So we're continuing with that. The low battery improvement project, the pre-qualifications period closed. We did receive 10 submittals on that. So we're going through those firms right now. We'll be moving forward to bid over the next few weeks. The Market Street project, we're addressing TRC comments at this point. And then Councilman Gregory, you had asked about the Willow Walk subdivision. And that subdivision, as you're probably familiar with, has a phase that was built below base flood elevation at the time. Rather than making the homes elevate at that time, we received a waiver from FEMA with the city to allow those homes to continue under base flood elevation. So they do have recurring flooding and large storm events. We did offer buyouts to a number of the properties that in that neighborhood, and a number of those property owners have accepted those buyouts. Those are in the next round of buyouts, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they've been approved. They're just not in demolition stage yet. And then we've continued in that neighborhood, just as we have throughout the city, trying to rehabilitate the roadside drainage systems to do the best we can for smaller rain events. That doesn't help as much with the major events in that subdivision, but it's hard with them being in the floodplain to really do protection against those large-scale flood events. And then to move on to the floodplain management update. Mayor, move on to the floodplain management update. Yes, sir. So we did complete demolition on the entire first round of single-family home buyouts at this point. And with the resolution of the HOA that's on the real estate agenda, we'll be able to move forward with advertisement for the demolition of the multifamily. And that should also move forward and be demolished this summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then finally, we had an executive session regarding private property encroachments and drainage easements, and we passed a motion in the committee to ask staff to make a more formal policy recommendation for obtaining easements as needed for these smaller drainage projects. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. And the reason that came in, because what we've been doing and trying to get these going back in these established neighborhoods and getting easements and talking to people, hoping to get people to sign off on it, it just takes too long. And the only way we can help the older neighborhoods with their drainage problems, in particular with the gravity flow drainage problems, is we have to have a way to put in a ditch and get in and service it. What we've been finding out is it takes a year and a half. Some people sign, 2 or 3 don't, and then we have to end up filing an action anyway. So this would quicken the process, and hopefully all of us and everybody in our districts are going to be affected by this, in particular in the older areas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Shade.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I just want to elaborate on what Councilmember Warren is mentioning. In particular, we had 2 pieces of property in my district on Culpeper, Mueller Drive, in which there was a ditch, and I think Councilmember Moody made this observation earlier in his report. He may have had a ditch, but there was no easement to that ditch, and these 2 pieces of property are a case in point in Northbridge subdivision as to that a ditch was there, but no easement to the ditch, and so people are allowed to build over it and create a blockage for water to flow out of it. And I think we've learned that in several of our older subdivisions, and this is sort of more of a common problem. So this motion that we've brought on the floor will help address that and expedite this process to get those ditches to be easement ditches, and we can maintain them and clean them up and enforce what we need to enforce. So,
good. Thank you. All right, and so staff will make a recommendation. We'll come back to the committee. Any further?
One other information that actually constituent came to Councilman Moody about the courtesy on our stormwater fee. We increased the stormwater fee so we can have more money, guess what, to fix drainage. Turns out we as a city actually can give a courtesy to everybody over 65 so they won't have to pay a stormwater fee at all. Now, we have to make a decision on that, ladies and gentlemen. If we're going to raise the money needed to fix these drainage problems, we have to include everybody. So we didn't know that until a person came up and asked Councilman Moody. I checked with CPW. That is in fact the case. But it actually flows back to, I think, an ordinance that was passed years and years ago, way before we started having all these rain events and sunny day flooding. So,
so that's another thing we plan to review in short order.
In short order. Because we'll never raise the revenue that we thought we were going to raise by increasing the fee.
All right, if there's no, Councilmember Moody.
I'd just like to go on record saying that I have my $10 on my bill. I look like I'm less than 65. I act like I'm less than. So my $10 is on my bill. So if anybody wants to see it, I'll be glad to show it to them.
All right. So next we'll move on to our Committee on Traffic and Transportation. Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a meeting this afternoon at 1:30. We had one item that needed to be taken up. We have an ordinance before the council to essentially have rules and regulations in our parking garages be enforceable by, among others, our police department. It's very comprehensive. It is nothing drastic. It was passed unanimously, and I would move for its approval. As amended, there were some typos, by the way.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our Committee on Community Development. I see our chairman is left. Who was vice chair? Maybe I was not present at the meeting.
I'd like to get back on that committee.
Okay. Does anybody want to step forward and make a report about our community development meeting that occurred last week?
Mr. Mayor, I was present. I'm happy to report. As part of the committee, we reviewed development plans for Hanover Street. We also reviewed the 2019 and 2020 federal budget. And as well, we reviewed and approved the Choice Neighborhood Initiative. All those items were approved unanimously by the committee, and I'll move for the adoption of the report.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, Committee on Ways and Means. Back to
let me, if I can, I think we need to, there was one clarifying point. Susan, help me here to get this correct. Under it said bills up for first reading for Ways and Means. The one specific to 999 Morrison Drive is actually second and third, correct?
It's on page 7 of the, sorry. On page 7.
So this is second reading.
It should be up for, it's the first ordinance that's listed under first reading for the following bills from Ways and Means. It's the ordinance authorizing mayor to execute on behalf of city a second amendment. That should be under second reading, not first reading. Just a clerical error, if we could move it over there.
I'll move the adoption report with that item actually being up for second reading, not third reading, and then we subsequently, I guess, can move to third reading.
All right.
Okay, so is it just second reading or is it second and third reading?
Second and third reading.
Right.
All right, any discussion on any of that? All in favor, who seconded?
Who was the second on that?
Karen. White. Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And we're clear we don't need a third reading separately for that item? Oh, okay. We have a motion for third reading and ratification of the item just mentioned. Any discussion? That's fine.
Or was it, is it Flint, Gregory and Moody? Second. Oh, okay. All right, I'll just pick someone.
Pick someone. There we go. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next up is bills for third reading, which is the PUD on Johns Island, Mr. Kerr's property. Second. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Wagner.
Yes, sir. Having a hard time figuring out what we changed here. It says amended to incorporate changes to the plan unit development guidelines to include conveyance of a street right-of-way to the city. What does that mean? We've been talking both on the 23rd and May 14th about the conveyance of the southern tine, both from the Martin Company and the Kerr track, the Kerrs. I don't think that's street right-of-way. That was the first thing that we've been talking about when I was asking for deferrals. Council said that we have additional work, last time, additional work to do on the agreement. Well, we haven't seen the agreement because it says attached to here, but it isn't attached here too. So that's my first problem. My second problem is the Southern Time from day one was required to meet the county and the city's version of what the Southern Pitchfork was going to look like. We also were going to meet with the county, both in April and again after the last meeting, to find out if in reality that was done. I know the meeting has not occurred. So I'm trying to figure out what it is we changed here, because we got them attached somewhere. And, you know, like a little while ago, back when we were talking about the Northern Pitchfork, which had the minor change, there were about 3 or 4 pages explaining that. But that's not what's happening here. On this one, it's just got like, hey, for the development guidelines attached here too and incorporated by reference. Okay, so we, the council, have asked for specific things during 2 meetings, and I don't know if we got them or not. A. The second thing is this has always been about traffic. I mean, from day one. And I mean, we're not talking just about what's happening on Johns Island. You know, that Gilligatus Bridge goes to James Island. We have Riverland Drive. We have all kinds of fun stuff going on over there. And nobody's talking about that. But the point I'm really trying to make here is, first, can I ask the first question first, and let me make one additional comment, okay? We, the city of Charleston, have an agreement for the Southern Pitchfork amongst all the players.
Councilmember, we did make changes to the PUD consistent with what was discussed last meeting, and that was sent under separate cover on Friday. And if you did not receive that, I apologize. But Chip is here, and he worked on that, and he can explain the changes that were made, and we can give you a copy of that if you don't have it, if you, for whatever reason, you didn't get it, and I apologize.
Well, I mean, you know, it's in here, but it isn't in here. That's my problem. That's
So I guess, Chip, if you want to come up and explain.
It was a very simple question. Is it in accordance with, or is it not? That's the first question. Okay, Chip.
Jennifer just indicated that it should be on y'all's desk, the hard copy of it.
And it was sent by email on Friday afternoon.
Yeah. And I sent just red line changes, and they're not all that complicated. One of them is that we changed, you know, the memorialization of a conveyance of the land necessary for the Pitchfork Road, or Southern Time on the Pitchfork Road. We reduced the maximum allowed density by 50 units from the previous version in both the residential portion and the commercial portion. So the overall permitted density dropped from the previous version you considered from 798 to 698. I made some minor changes that the language, you know, to tie up the language. In the commercial area, there'll be no building permits for commercial buildings within that area submitted within 2 years following the approval date of the PUD. And Section 6A is the portion that has the agreement about the Pitchfork Road, the agreement to convey the Pitchfork Road. And they do have the obligation to grant us that Pitchfork Road as a condition to obtaining, I believe it's certificates of occupancy. The exhibit was also sent to you at the same time, which shows the outline of the Pitchfork Road, and there is an agreement with one exception, and there's a little area outside the PUD itself that's owned by a related party to the Kerrs. And I told everybody I could tell this, but I can't include something in a PUD that binds an adjacent property owner that's not in the city of Charleston. We could have done a deed or something like that before the PUD was passed, but we didn't have time to do that, I guess, over the last 2 weeks. So, did you have another question?
That's why I asked for the original deferment, but that's okay with that. So, are we the owners of the Pitchfork or not? Yes, no?
Under the Well, I mean, we will be if this passes, and they have the obligation to give it to us, yes, sir. Except for that little strip. The reason it can't go through their property is there's a cemetery blocking the way on their property, so they couldn't have just moved it onto their
Now,
property.
is that in accordance with the county plan?
Yes,
Which was
I'm getting from
number
planning.
one,
Yes.
and we have that from the county? Because they told me personally when I called them that it wasn't.
I'm not sure about the question here.
That was the first argument. That was from day one argument.
There's no county plan right now for the southern tine or the southern pitchfork. And I'll go ahead and address, if I may, your second section about my meeting with the county. I did not have a physical meeting. I spoke to staff, and I spoke to a couple of council members, including the chairman. We did conduct a meeting in my office with Mr. Kerr and Mark. I forget Mark's last name. So we can control what we can control. We can't control what county council does going forward. At this point, given the changes that the county made to their current roadway plans, which include building the northern pitchfork and the addition of intersection improvements to River Road and Maybank Highway beyond the work that was done last year. They're going to make 2 left lane turns on the Maybank off of River Road. That's part of the north pitchfork. Well, it's a separate project, but they're going to basically do them at the same time. So they're committed to that. They are not committed to funding the southern pitchfork or tine at this point. I guess it was about a year ago when the city and Mr. Kerr met with the county, and we addressed the issue of the conflict or the potential conflict with 526. Just the county staff never resolved issues that they enumerated to me again in conversation since our last meeting about what they call the geometry of the road, the impact of wetlands, and the impact on trees. In fact, the new alignment that's proposed by Mr. Kerr, it has less wetlands impact than the former one did and less impact on the trees. But regardless of that, the county has never approved the project for funding, and so it would entail re-engaging with the county with this new right-of-way and work with their staff and get them comfortable with the geometry, the impact on the wetlands and the trees, and then get their support to even go to county council and ask for them to consider funding for it. So I did what I shared with you, that I, in all due diligence, they're not at a place where they're going to say, we're going to fund the southern pitchfork, and that's just what it is.
Well, on the 17th is when they had their finance committee meeting and made the decision that was all over, that there was not going to be any funding for any pitchfork, period. That was on the 17th. That is correct. But the word I got was we had the agreement in accordance with our last meeting that we would still, us and them, we, the city, would control the pitchfork, what there is of it, the remnants of the pitchfork. Yes or no? That was the very first question. Did the agreement say that the city had the pitchfork? That's important for a reason.
What we're agreeing to do is to take title to the right-of-way, which is the first step to actually getting it done, and a very necessary step, if I may say.
Okay, the second part of that, there's a right of rescission. Is that not correct? If we don't do the next step, which we don't even know what the first step really is yet, they can, if we don't get everything done in accordance with whatever this document says, then they can back on out and take the property back. True or false?
That's true. It's-
A true is okay, that's okay.
It's kind of hurrying through, because I know you had your hand raised. If we don't build it within 10 years, they could take the property back, and the other thing that they have the right to do is if we don't construct it when they're ready for it, then they could go ahead and begin the construction process at their sole cost and expense. We still have control and ownership of the road, but we did that with, I think, is it the Wendy's property on the crosstown, where if we don't do it, the other person will want to do it in order to have access to their property. So that was in there.
Okay, so my information was right from the county and from this thing. So what it looks like is, what we asked was to make sure that all parties, and it was in the PUD, okay, that all parties, city, contractors, county, everybody would be in agreement on the pitchfork, quote, pitchfork. Didn't happen. We have some unknown requirement now for this same pitchfork that the city is involved in, but we're not sure of the details from what I've just heard. And if we don't do it real quick, they're going to take it back. Okay. So it seems to me like without any county involvement, what have we done? And we're right back to square one. Nothing has happened. I've wasted a whole lot of my time talking to y'all on both the April 23rd and May 4th, and we're right back where we started from, and everything that the council said has basically not occurred. And that's okay with me, I guess, because, you know, I'm not real sure how we got to do it, but I'm just trying to figure out what this thing says. And you know, I was told the other day, well, no, I'm not even going to go there. I'm done with this, I guess. I would say let's vote it and be done with it. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen
That's
here.
what I was going to say, too. The other part of that says, what have we done? What we have here is a PUD that lays out certain requirements that they've got to meet in order to develop this thing. We have already got the developers and the owners to agree to downzone or reduce the density. So we've got that. We've got a whole bunch of stuff here that, I mean, we can't stop them from developing it. They can develop it without the PUD. And so I guess what I was getting ready to say was exactly what you called for. I'm going to vote to support the PUD, and I'm ready to vote. So I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Had that.
Yes, I think we had a motion on the floor already. Councilmember Seekings?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I mean, it is not unprecedented for this council to do the following, which is to approve something which also needs some help from other bodies, including the county, and then resolve that once we do this, to send you with a resolution for this council to go out there and advocate for the funding and the building of the Southern Pitchfork, which is exactly what we need. So this is a step. We're getting the property. We've got the property. You take the property and a resolution of this council or the county and go fight for it. Let's go get the Southern Pitchfork built. We got 10 years. We should be able to do it in 10 years.
That's right.
So I don't know how we do that. I mean, are you ready to go forward with a resolution from this council and saying, we've got the land, you go build it?
It might not be as simple as that, but
well, I mean, you know, it's.
I will ardently advocate for this to be done, and I think it's on some Charleston book, come hell or high water, we need this infrastructure improvement. This is the first step to getting it done.
It's the same thing.
The PUD does allow for a reduction in density, which is significant. Whoever ends up developing the property will still have to comply with not just our own regulations, but those of the South Carolina Department of Transportation and our new stormwater requirements that will be put in place later this year. So, you know, this is a first step to getting the infrastructure done. I know there are some folks that would like to see nothing new be built, but I think this is the fair thing for us to do, to approve this PUD, and it's a fair thing to do in order to provide for the future infrastructure to start by getting the road, the right-of-way for the road.
And
without that, we would not be able to go to step two.
And in follow-up to that, we're about to do all of those things. We're about to approve this PUD, I think, and we're going to have access and control of the right-of-way through there. The next logical step is go advocate for the construction of it.
That's correct.
That's what we need to do, starting tonight, I think. Tonight.
Councilmember Jackson.
Mayor, you just mentioned, I expressed myself 2 weeks ago, and I appreciate all of the time and the attention that Mr. Kerr in particular has given my concerns. I know that I'm coming, new to this party in terms of how long this particular property has been under consideration and reworking and evaluation and negotiation. So I fully respect that process. My reservations that I expressed 2 weeks ago haven't changed, in that I think that there literally are 3 cards that we're still leaving on the table until we know the answers to them. And in my framework of making decisions that are as fully informed as we possibly could make them, I think those 3 cards need to be turned over. And just for the record again, it's literally the Dutch dialogue's completions. They're studying Johns Island for the more global watershed challenges that we have there. We have a comprehensive stormwater manual rewrite that's in process, and hopefully we're all going to be in agreement to pass it this fall. But I want to hear from someone that can assure me that if we pass the PUD tonight, that doesn't mean that they'll be vested under the existing regulations. So I don't know if that's true, but that's a huge item for me. And then the third one is, yes, we want the pitchfork. There's no question about it. I think we would be in a much better negotiating position if we waited to find out the answers from the state level of funding for 526, because the county doesn't want to think about any other road systems until they know the answer to that. So in my framework, those would be the 3 cards that we would wait to see how they turn over and how that impacts our decision-making about this PUD. I tried to ask Mr. Kerr, I admire the fact that they're leaving density on the table. I think, that's always a big carrot for every developer that comes in and says, I could do bigger and more, and I'm agreeing to do less. Mr. Kerr told me that he thinks that the 116 single-family houses are the only thing that's going to go in the whole residential section. And I know that they've cut back that number from their first offer by 50 in the last 2 weeks, but that's still 75 that are on their list of possible that they're not talking about. So I don't know the answer to that. The idea of waiting for 2 years to see the permits for the commercial zone, a lot can happen in 2 years. And so yeah, we'll have a lot of density that's on paper, and if the economy stays strong, then that density is going to dictate life on Johns Island, on that part of Johns Island. Nobody thought of a hotel when this was first being considered, how many ever, 10, 12 years ago. So I don't know where that's come from, but that gives me, and I know a lot of residents, huge concerns. I know that I'm in a minority, and so I only want to say that I really hope that we make good and wise decisions with the information that we're going to be getting. I would like to know the answer about the stormwater manual. Let's say it's not passed until at the very end of the year or January, if our election, campaign season takes us over and we don't decide to do things like that. So if it didn't pass until January and this PUD is coming in for subdivision, which is the next thing to happen, correct? Then if they get that subdivision approval this fall, they would be under the existing stormwater regulations, correct? Because they would have vested rights. So that's a big concern to me.
We will address that. I'm going to be very optimistic that we're going to be able to pass on stormwater regulations late this summer or early fall. Mr. Lindsay.
I'll also just load the caveat that's by saying Mr. McQueenie may have additional information, but our previous interpretation is that the stormwater regulations that are in effect at the time are the stormwater regulations that are applied. The state vesting does not apply to stormwater regulations in our interpretation. And that's how, if we pass new regulations, those would be the ones applied to this project if it is still anywhere in the TRC process. Is how we would interpret that.
Councilmember Griffin.
Precedent, but that's lovely to.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Kerr or one of his representatives a question. We tonight had 2 public hearings on PUDs where amendments were made. Do we have 3 PUDs that were on? No, 2. We had 2 PUDs where amendments were made where I actually think that the PUD got better. And so my question would be, would you be willing, as this process goes on, if we're able to, as we make changes and improve, would y'all be willing to work with us on amendments as well to maybe amend the PUD a little bit so that, whatever goes in place tonight, I mean, would y'all have an open ear to maybe make amendments or changes if things change in the city over the next couple of years?
Mr. Kerr, do you want to, Mr. Seaman?
I mean, yeah, this is, for the past several years, this has been a very open working relationship, all the way through. We would certainly want to continue that, and as long as they were reasonable requests that, the project could tolerate, I think we would be acceptable to continue in working.
Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've witnessed that the PUD is a powerful planning tool, and it gives you a tremendous amount of information up front, and that's what we've witnessed in this. Look at how many times we rezone a property having no information up front on what's going to come. And as a result of that information being up front, the Kerrs didn't have to enter into a PUD. They did that voluntarily. They weren't compelled to do the PUD, which opened up all this conversation about the Southern Pitchfork, number of units, how many they can do, reducing those units, et cetera, et cetera. And you're exactly right. I know my English teacher wouldn't be good on that, but you're exactly right in that the PUD has gotten better. The plan has gotten better. And I don't, Councilman Wagner, we work like hand in glove. But you have pushed this to the point to where it has gotten better for your people on Johns Island. So as we go to the county, hopefully to advocate for the money to build a Southern Pitchfork, we got to rally the people on Johns Island to join in with us in going to the county. It's just not the mayor and a couple of council members and the Kerrs. The people on Johns Island need that Southern Pitchfork as well. When Mayor Rowley came here and said he wanted to do an African American museum and needed to raise $75 million, he didn't have a penny. The funding formula was he came to council. County council didn't know it, but we went to county council, got money, then we went to the state, and now we're asking the nation. 8, 9 million, I don't know how much it costs to build that, less than 10 million to build that. That's within the capacity of county council, but you know what? The people's got to be behind it, and with your leadership, and others, the mayor around this table, people that care about Johns Island, you can get that kind of money to build that Southern Pitchfork. So please take advantage of the PUD process and don't discourage people from using it, because a lot of people don't like to use it because you have to put this information up front. And it has benefited the cities of Charleston. So thank you.
White, and then back to
I've had some reservations, of course, about this PUD from the beginning, and really it was what we all have reservations with, and that's not necessarily acquiring the land, which the Kerrs have been very willing to donate as far as being able to do the Southern Pitchfork. It's the biggest liability is the building of the road, and you all know that we don't build bridges and we don't build roads in the city. It's not what we do, and we don't have a funding source to do it. So my fear is that what happens if we press forward with the expectation in a 10-year time frame in order to complete it, And if the county is not inclined to be supportive of building it, it's going to create a liability for the city of Charleston. Because the public outcry is going to be, y'all accepted the road donation, y'all accepted the responsibility to get it built, you couldn't get the county to do it, and your time, the clock is ticking, and it's now your responsibility, the city of Charleston, to own up and pony up and do the deal. And we all know what challenges we face in the future. We talked about maintenance issues tonight. We've got to really think through this process, I think, and my biggest issue is I think we're going to create a liability for the city. And, you know, quite candidly, I'm not sure how well we're going to be received if the mayor takes this to the county right now, given the fact they just had a fairly lengthy discussion that ultimately is going to cost about $3 million for police officers and schools because there was a disagreement on how we're going to do that. So I'm not sure how well received this is going to be when we just cost the county $3 million, which in their mind, I think is going to be how they perceive it. So I worry that we create liabilities for ourselves. We don't think far enough in advance about the situation. I think that's where we're going to end up. And I think we all recognize this needs to happen. But if the county's not prepared to get on board early, or at least conceptually say, yes, we're in agreement with getting it built and we'll help find the funding, but I haven't heard that yet at all. Actually, I've heard the exact opposite, that it's not on the list and it's not going to get on the list for some time. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to kind of tie your comments with Mr. Seeking's comments, because this is not a lot unlike I-526. There's a lot of us around this table that have been fighting for I-526, and the pressure keeps mounting. The pressure keeps mounting because the traffic goes up. These people could develop this property without giving this land or anything else, and the traffic is going to come. I mean, what we did was we created an artificial line that says we're going to not develop outside that. That means you got to develop inside that line. And so we put in water and sewer, we've done all that stuff, and we had it zoned. And the development is going to come, whether it's right on this piece of property or around there, it's going to come. We're going to need 526. We're going to need this southern tie at some point also. And so exactly what Mr. Seeking said is that as the pressure on us keeps mounting, and it will, that we've got to be advocates for this property. I mean, we can't. What we're asking this developer is, hey, give us all you can give us, and then we're not going to give you anything because we don't have any guarantees. And I don't think you can do that. I mean, they've given us everything we've asked for that they can give us. And so as we develop this PUD, it'll get better, but we are going to have to be advocates for this southern tie, because you're right. They've not, it's not on their radar. I mean, I've asked a couple people that I know pretty well. It's not there. But anyway, I think the right thing to do tonight is approve it and keep up that pressure. I mean, we're sitting here talking about the hotel. I mean, if we'd had a PUD or something that could tell us exactly where that hotel was going to go and how it was going to look and everything, we wouldn't be worried about all these overlay districts and everything. But that's what this PUD does. It kind of narrows it down and keeps it focused. And I think the Curzon developers will come back with improvements over time as it benefits them, as it benefits the city. That's just in everybody's business. So again, I'm going to support this.
Councilmember Shade. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I get Mr. McQueenie to come back up on the answer to Councilmember White's question about liability, if the southern pitchfork is not built, the southern line is not built, what kind of liability are we looking at?
Well, we have no obligation to build the road, and we can deed it back to them at any time if we don't want to build the road. So they're, obviously you're concerned about having, the traffic issues out there. The other thing I did want to point out is they don't have the obligation to deed us the road until they need a certificate of occupancy. To get any certificate of occupancy out there, they've got to deed us the road, and the deed will then be recorded. That's when the 10 years starts to run. So it's actually not right now, it's when they need their first certificate of occupancy or whenever they deed us the road, whenever that deed is recorded.
And that's what I was reading on your red line version. As a condition of PUD approval, and prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any building constructed within the PUD boundaries, owner shall deed to the city, the real property, et cetera, dealing with the southern pitchfork. And I think you have in here, the city shall have no obligation to construct the southern line of the pitchfork. So
Correct.
that covers us, and it answers that liability issue. Mr. Mayor, I call for the question.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Three. Councilmember Jackson as well. The motion carries. Next is our bills up for second reading. We have 1 through 14 up for second reading. Is there any discussion, and we got a second, right? Is there any discussion on any one of those numbers 1 through 14? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Now for third reading and ratification of items 1 through 14. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next is our bills up for first reading. First, we have an ordinance to amend the order of business for city council meetings. We have a motion to approve. Did we get a second? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Oh, Councilmember Jackson.
I just have a question about how this would actually work. So would this be, as the council members decide to bring something forward under this item on the agenda, would it have to be placed there prior to the agenda meeting where the agenda is set, or is it going to be more like a citizen's petition and we bring a topic up on the spot?
No, it's intended that you would notify the clerk of court.
Right, so should that be in the ordinance? How we would be required to?
I don't know that that's required. It could be, if you want to amend it to say that.
It's in this M1 item?
What this is talking about, this was a request, if I remember correctly, from Councilmember Griffin.
Yes. Right.
And so what this is doing basically is it is just changing the order a little bit of the outline that we use for the council agenda.
It's not adding, it's not changing our process about how to get something on the, it's still got to be the Monday before and all that.
Okay.
Everything's the same. It's just moving, I think, petitions and communications. Or was it petitions?
I think we're creating a new category. That's right. And we still have miscellaneous business for, as needed. All right.
Councilmember, it's going to be outlined on the agenda.
I would agree with that. I just didn't see how that actually spelled out that requirement in this ordinance.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our ordinance regarding hotels. Motion to approve. And I would just like to make a brief thank you to those who served on the task force. And I'm going to call out their names. Some are present here. Susan Bass, Winslow Hasty, Councilmember Gary White, Councilmember Dudley Gregory, Councilmember Mike Seekings, Helen Hill, Deborah Powell Anderson, Christopher King with the Preservation Society, Jimmy Palacios, who represented the hotel industry, Tim Muller, a neighborhood representative, and although listed as an alternate, John Marsland, I think he participated more than anybody on the task force, so thank you, special thanks to John. He subbed in for someone completely when they didn't attend one of the meetings, and then at the next meeting, we just asked him to join us anyway, even though everybody was present, because his remarks and additions to the matter at hand were very meaningful. So thank you all who served. As was stated earlier tonight by a number of folks during citizens' participation, I think it was a very good result. And so the floor is now open. Councilmember Moody.
Yeah, I'm obviously support this, but I did have a question about the process. This would go before, I mean, if this, once this is in place, so this would come before the BZA zoning for its approval? Is that?
Planning Commission.
Is that the process it goes through? When
we give first reading tonight, the BZA will be able to use this in their decision-making from tonight on forward. The matter will go to the Planning
Commission for its
The task force, by the way, agreed, I should have mentioned, that we're still in business. We're not done yet. And after the remarks tonight that you may have, and after the remarks from the Planning Commission, the task force does plan to convene again before it comes back to council for second reading, just to see if we have any further recommendations.
Yeah, and that's, I wanted that clarified, but the other question that I had about the BZA process, I had a recent occasion to have a interaction with the BZA, and in my mind, I didn't know the difference. There's an exception and there's a variance. The thing that I was dealing with, I didn't realize there was a difference, but the item that I was dealing with was an exception and not a variance. And there's a process within the BZA that once they approve something, that if it's an exception, you've got 5 business days to appeal it. If it's a variance, you've got 15 days, I believe, to appeal it. And basically, the appeal comes to city council before it goes to circuit court. Is that, am I right on that?
No, sir.
think so.
Okay. And there's actually case law that says you can't set up a process to go through city council from a BZA review. It's considered an independent sort of entity from the city to create some sort of, an independent reviewing body. Under state law, you can appeal within 30 days either decision to the circuit court, and under our ordinances, I'm not sure about the variances, but under our ordinances, you can move for the BZA to reconsider their decision within 5 days of the date the decision is made, and that'll stay the time to appeal. So you can wait until they reconsider and then appeal the decision to reconsider.
So at what point or how does city council get involved in that at all? Not that I'm looking for any,
You set up the conditions that they have to consider and the discretion that they have through guidelines that are structured such that, people can sort of figure out, relatively speaking, where their application fits in the process.
Yeah,
so you get to set up the structure, which is with this ordinance, you're dictating what the BZA has to consider for a special exception. Under variances, state law, it almost more or less preempts what the process
whatever
is.
we say.
The state statute, yes, sir.
All right. That'll do some more study.
Councilmember Griffin, then Jackson.
I've got a couple of questions, and I too would like to thank the task force. I think that they put a ton of time and effort into a short time span to come up with a really great ordinance, but my questions are more of in between first and second reading. I'd like to get some more information from our staff. Number one, I would like to know these exceptions, the A through N or M or whatever it is, why they were put in. I would like to get some commentary from the task force of why they put those in there. I've thought that we would have that going into this meeting, but we haven't got it yet, which is fine because I think that we could definitely do some more small tinkering to this. One thing that jumped out right away to me was item M. The proposed accommodation use will not result in there being more than blank full-service hotels in the city. Are we going to come up with that number, or is planning department going to come up with that number? Look, Mike, you're saying we are. So that's something that we're going to have to discuss. But also, I would like to know if this were to go into effect, I would like to see some sort of statistics about how many less hotels would have been approved in the last year or something along those lines. Because I like to see what kind of correlation, how much good this is going to do. Because this, to me, we talked about units on James Island and Johns Island when we talked about doing a moratorium over there, and we realized it only affected like 100 units out of 5,000. So I would like to know how many units or how many accommodation hotels this would affect, and how much of an impact it's going to be, because all this language is great, but if it doesn't do a lot of good and limit the number of hotels, then it's just lip service. So those are the kind of things I'd like to see statistic-wise. I think that would really help my decision-making. If this doesn't help, then I just think we ought to just put a moratorium on hotels for 2 years. But I'd like to do this first. I think that this is a really great document, and I really commend everybody who worked on it. I just want to see how much good it's going to do. Thanks.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Griffin and everyone who has thanked the task force and obviously the staff work that went into organizing the task force. I think that it is a great example of how we need to be bringing together the stakeholders in ways that are productive and iterative and all of that. So I think this is a really good document that tries to capture a lot of good policy for the city. I have some more specific questions, and I don't know if I should ask them now, or maybe I'll call the planning department. But as one example, there's some clause here under A that says something about, sorry, I just lost it. Says something about if the hotel that's being proposed is going to take away existing units, dwelling units, then there's a whole description in here about how we're going to replace them, and they can be replaced off-site within a radius of 1/4 mile from the site. If the proposed off-site location does not result in an over-concentration of low-income households. I don't know what that means, but that sounds like something we don't want to do it. So there's just some odd things like that. And of course, you know, my own interest is to get as much as we can for affordable housing. And so I know that I thank Councilmember Gregory, who dug his heels in about making sure we had some way of contributing to the city's housing trust fund. So I did my homework, and it's referenced in item N that whenever a hotel is going in, they have to contribute to the City of Charleston's Affordable Workforce Housing Account with a fee calculated in accordance with the provisions of Section 54-299-2. And that's our MU workforce way of calculating cash in lieu fees. But that whole formula is tied directly to how many units are going to be workforce in a particular mixed-use property. And I don't see any correlation to that with the hotel scope. So I think there's some things like that we really need to drill down on and be as ferocious as we can be for making sure that we get cash for housing, because everyone knows that it's our hospitality industry that, in terms of a steady force of jobs for our community, they're the ones that are hurting the most in terms of being able to live anywhere near where they're required to work. They can't telecommute. They have to work in the hotel, in the restaurant, in the food and bev industry, in the transportation industry, where their boots on the ground. So I'm definitely going to pass this as first reading, but I hope we can figure out a way to have maybe a joint planning commission council discussion about it. Maybe we can all convene in the planning office at their invitation, but I definitely have some very specific questions I need to know.
So everyone will be welcome to address specific questions to planning, and then we're going to Planning Commission, and you'll be welcome to attend there, of
Yeah.
course. And then the task force will meet again, and then, you know, 4 of us are on it, but I certainly welcome you to
Yeah.
attend when we come back there. So I think we got lots of opportunities to tweak it even a little more. Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody who, came together quickly on this. Can I get legal counsel to come to the microphone, please?
Francis Cantwell did draft the ordinance, so I'm familiar with it, but
Yeah.
if there's
So
a problem with it, I'm going to blame
I got
her.
one
If it's good, I'm going to
question.
take credit.
I got one question. I think it's a yeah or no. When we pass this, and I think we will, can this be made retroactive? Does council have the power to make this retroactive to January 1st?
Not to properties with vested rights without, without talking to another attorney.
Well, between now and second reading, we certainly can get that answer.
Well, no, I know
didn't
you
know I was
can't.
going to ask that.
You could not apply it retroactively to properties that already have special exception permits under state law. They have a 2-year window to utilize those permits and construct and complete their properties, and then they can get the 1-year extensions that we've talked about before. But once they have a special exception, we can't. I think there's 2 conditions. If they make a material misrepresentation to the BZA, then the BZA can hold a hearing and try to revoke it. And there's one other condition that's similar. I think that, it's like a substantial change of conditions. It's not necessarily material misrepresentation of fact, but there's only 2 circumstances where that applies, and neither of them applies to a situation like this.
All right.
Depending on the facts.
Thank you.
All in favor of the
Mr. Mayor.
motion? Oh, we have more discussion. Councilmember
Just
White.
a
Yes,
couple
sir.
quick comments, and I did serve on the committee, and Chip, maybe I can give you just a couple of things to as takeaways from this evening, try to incorporate just some things that after I had some more opportunity to digest this, some thoughts that came up. Under item 8, under those things that were to be considered as part of the BZA process, it spoke specifically to land use within 500 feet of one accommodation another. And I get the intent was about the diversity of uses, but one of the things that I thought about is as long as we're considering these as factors as part of the decision-making process and not just an arbitrary, the answer is, no, you can't do it because of, if we have incorporated, if it becomes a sort of a no situation, I think that we end up with sort of a de facto spot zoning. So I would just ask that we, for the test of the law, to make sure that we don't find ourselves getting tested legally if it's applied incorrectly. The other item on item 11 is it talked about demonstrated provisions for off-street parking. And what I understand more and more, we're having developers who are using mechanical parking, stacked parking and whatnot. And I don't think that our current ordinance, it doesn't provide for it, but it doesn't disallow it. But one of the things I might maybe recommend that we encourage is that we add to this a valet-assisted or valet-operated mechanical parking as an option, so that we can go ahead and spell that out for that opportunity. And then the last one, and this one I guess, maybe we got late in the evening when we were going through this, but item 17, it simply states the number of sleeping units proposed as part of the accommodations use. But it doesn't say anything else. So it's a little vague. I'm not sure if I can remember exactly what it was we were trying to accomplish. We took a lot out, but we replaced it with a very simple statement. So I guess I just want to make sure that that I know what in fact what we were trying to accomplish. I just can't recall. We had a lot of things happen all at once. And then I would like to say and thank the mayor for listening and taking my plea or our plea to communicate and to go through this process. As I stated at the last meeting, I felt like the groups that needed to be at the table were all headed in the same direction, generally speaking. And I think after a couple of meetings, it was pretty clear that that was the case. Of course, wish we would have done this about 3.5 years ago, because I think we could have eliminated a lot of consternation on all parties involved. But I do appreciate the opportunity to have at least gotten to this point, and I think that we're in a position now where, I'm not saying we don't have a little bit of tweaking to do, but I think this was proof positive that if you get everybody to the table, you roll up your sleeves, and you're willing to negotiate and work, that we can come to a good resolution on this. So thank you, I appreciate it.
I think Seekings was next, and then I'll come back.
Seekings. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me.
That's all right. Where's Laura Yarborough? That's what she calls me all the time. It's great. So thank you for letting me serve. Thank you for doing all this, Mr. Mayor. I thought it was a good collaborative process. As someone who sat on the inside looking out on this, to my fellow council members, this, I think, is a good first start. It's not perfect. It might not even be great. It's pretty good. A couple things I'd like to just point out before we send it to the Planning Commission that we should clean up. And I talked to Mr. Lindsay about this today, and maybe he wants to get to the microphone just to add into my comments. As to item M, there's a reason that it's blank there, where we have blank full-service hotels, is because we weren't really sure how many fitting the definition full-service hotels are in the city. I talked with Mr. Lindsay about that today. We think the number is...
Well, we think the existing number is 7. It depends on the legal definition of full service, so we need to get that done.
But 7.
We think it's 7. That's from Helen Hale at the CVB.
But I will tell you that the consensus inside of the task force was whatever the number was, plus 3 or 4 was what should go into this blank. Whatever, if it was 7, we agreed that there should be 3 or 4 more full-service hotels, and that would be the cap on that. And then if one went out of service, there would be room for another one. So I don't know how we're going to fill in that blank, but I don't think we can send something to the Planning Commission with a blank and have them review it. So I think we should probably insert the number 4 for safety, and I would move that we do that for now with the recommendation with the observation that the Planning Commission and the task force is going to review it again. But I will tell you, I think that number will be looked on favorably by the task force. Just an observation. More complicated. Sorry, yes, sir.
And how many do we have
I think we have
now?
7.
So wouldn't you make the number 7 plus a few more?
Wait, we just don't know the number. So when they insert that number, it's just, right.
That number.
4 more than we've got now is what we're
That would be 11.
We think.
Okay.
We're just not exactly sure between now and when we get there. I'm just saying plus 4 is what we should put in there.
Do you want to amend this to go ahead and say 11?
To say plus 4.
Or 10 or? X plus 4?
Yeah. Existing plus 4.
Increasing the number of full-service hotels in the city by...
No more than
4. The next one is a little more complicated. I'm not sure how we figure it out tonight, but I do want to put it on our radar, and particularly Councilmember Gregory, who fought so hard for Provision N. Provision N is an important provision because it does allow us to take advantage of development in our city where people are profiting and get into the attainable housing game, which is we need to do. However, Provision N, as it's drafted, is unenforceable, just so you know. It is a fee calculated in accordance with the provision of Section 54-292.2, which, if you pull it up, is a very complicated section of our zoning ordinance that was put in place during MU, workforce housing provisions that we put in there, and it's calculated, as Councilmember Jackson pointed out, based on the number of units. It's complicated. It doesn't work here, so we need to have a formula. This has to be either a straight, can I just finish?
Yeah.
Either a straight fee, which I think our legal counsel is going to tell us we can't do. I don't know yet, but we'll see. Or it's got to be a fee in lieu of something. And right now, as drafted, it's not. So I don't know how we clean that up, particularly Councilmember Gregory. I think we need some collaborative process on that. But I do think we need to clean it up before it goes to the Planning Commission, because if we don't, it'll come back to us and we're going to get in the spin cycle again, and we don't want to do that. So my suggestion for purposes of tonight is we ask our legal counsel, our planning staff, and in particular, Councilmember Gregory, to come up, look at the provision in the zoning ordinance that exists, 54-292.2C, which is complicated, but is tied into units and rental units only and all that, and figure out what this fee is in lieu of. And there are some options, by the way. In the full-service hotels, and one of the things I've always advanced, and I believe it to be the case, we should require full-service hotels to park on site, and the way to do that is make them park underground. I mean, we've done that with the Bennett Hotel, we've done it with we're doing it with the new hotel that's on East Bay Street, we're going to do it at the old Mason Prep site, not the Mason Prep site, First Baptist site, thank you. So that is one thing to look at and to tie it into that, but it's got to be tied into something in lieu of, because I think if it's a straight fee, that creates some other issues. And I don't want to, and again, it's something we talked about today. So just as drafted, I just don't want us to get into a place where this goes off into the hinterlands and we have some questions about the legality of it. Let's address it on the front end before it gets to the Planning Commission. So I'd just like to hear from Mr. Lindsay, if you don't mind, Mayor, really quickly to see if I'm way off base on this or if he agrees, because this in the end is going to be his baby. I mean, him and Mr. Krawcheck, they're the ones who got to do all this, so hit me.
If it's the will of council, we would be happy to get together with the respective parties, Councilmember Gregory, and have a good look at it before it gets to Planning Commission.
Am I on the right track, though, with this whole idea of fee in lieu or just a straight fee?
We certainly want to make sure that the fees in lieu are written properly before they are put into ordinances, yes.
That's code for we need to do something. So anyway, Mr. Mayor, I don't know exactly what my motion is, but my motion is before this hits the Planning Commission, that we need to put a provision in there that is understandable to the people getting in the business and enforceable from our legal staff, and it's not a straight flat fee, because I don't think we can do that. So with that, I do want to thank everybody. This is a good start. It's going to change a good bit, I think, as we go, but off we go. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Gregory.
I think there's a key component that we're not really using. I think our housing director needs to be a part of any of this discussion.
Right.
Because she knows the rules better than any of us. And I think when we talk fee in lieu of, I think during our discussion, we were talking about square footage, somehow tying it to square footage. So we can sort of work all that out. But I do think that it's very important that our director of housing be a part of this discussion.
So I must share that even though I was inspired by Councilmember Gregory, I made the addition about this fee in lieu, and it was intended to be very simple and not complicated at all. It was take the square footage of the building times our fee in lieu, that's the same as the MU fee.
But it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
And if it doesn't say it, we can't enforce it, so.
That's right. If we can just make what we talked about at the task force meeting, I think
Francis can't well draft this portion, Julie.
As you answered me earlier about the Southern Pitchfork, it may not be quite that simple.
That's right.
I think that one is. I don't think this one is. I think this one, if we do it as a straight fee, we're going to have some legal issues we're going to have to tackle.
Okay. So the way I read y'all right now, read us, is that we have a motion on the floor to accept the ordinance with the addition in paragraph M that the full service accommodations would increase by no more than 4, and that N would specify a more simplified expression of the fee in lieu.
And the key being fee in lieu of.
I said fee in lieu. Correct. I said that. Councilmember Griffin.
Just to kind of wrap up, 2 more things I wanted to touch on. I hate whenever I read these ordinances and I see things like significantly increase automobile traffic. So we want to look at that again, I'm sure, and we want to get some sort of how's that word that I can't ever spell? Specificity on that, because significantly increase is just not a good word ever, especially in an ordinance like this. And finally, I'm the young guy on this group, and I'll be honest, every once in a while I like to go out on the weekend and I like to go to a rooftop bar, because it's a wonderful place to go. We're lucky that we have beautiful weather. We're lucky that we have some of the most beautiful scenery ever. And when I was growing up, I used to love to go to a rooftop restaurant and have breakfast with my family on Sundays. We were very, very lucky. So, I would like the task force to look at that again. I don't think that we have to have some sort of blanket statement that we can't have any more rooftop bars. I can understand that if there's a proximity to a neighborhood, but correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we have some sort of litigation over a rooftop bar here recently with the hotel?
It's still going on.
Still going on. So I don't know if we really want to open up that can of worms again. I think that we could find a way to still honor the character of the neighborhoods, but there's plenty of places along King Street that are perfect for rooftop restaurants and bars, and they're very, very successful. And I might find the love of my life there one day, so y'all keep me. Thank y'all so much.
Let's see what happens with that at the planning
task
commission.
force discussed that. I mean, the feeling was that we have enough already, and there's a goodly number of them out there. I don't have a count on it, but along the way, we'll be happy to reconsider that. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's also important that, significantly and all that stuff, which is throughout, we discussed it with the task force.
We did.
There was a reason for it.
Hopefully that commentary that I asked for.
There are some places, according to Attorney Cantwell, that some of that kind of language is frankly appropriate. So we did discuss that. All right.
Yep. Call question.
Any further comment?
No. The $3, the fee, how does that keep pace with inflation?
Well, it does.
We put a fixed fee in versus a percent.
But we had this discussion also at the task force that the fees already should be reconsidered, that we have applied to MU zoning, that developers have readily been paying it, even though they fussed with us so when we first came up with the fee. So it might be a good time for us to take another look at that.
I just think 10 years from now, whatever fee we plug in, how does that keep pace?
Yeah, and when we review it again, maybe we build in some inflation factor or some multiplier or something like that. Okay, all in favor of the ordinance as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next we have a call to go to executive session to discuss some litigation. And we have a motion and a second to go into executive session to discuss the LDC matter. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We'll go to my office. I would like to let folks know, a lot of times we have an executive session and we do not expect to take any action. We do expect, we may in fact take action on this matter when we return in a little bit.